He looked around at his friends' faces. No one knew what to do. None of them had ever encountered something like this before. His heart raced as he took in the beautiful sight of the Disney-looking fawn, unaware of the threat that lurked within the shadows of the surrounding forest. He knew he had to act fast, but how could he have known that this adorable, defenseless creature could throw him into harm's way? Despite having lived in a rural area for a long time, Steve Knoop never thought he'd experience a wildlife encounter like this. It happened when he set out on a road trip with his friends. He was driving down a road that bordered the woods. They were chatting and having a good time when all of a sudden he slammed on the brakes. The men in the car jolted forward. They looked at Steve, bewildered and unsettled by the halt. They started to scold him for such a brash action. But Steve was barely listening. He was squinting at something, trying to make out what lay on the road before him. And then the rest of them saw it. In the middle of the road was a small brown lump. Their first thought was that it was an animal that had been hit by a car, but there was no evidence of any impact or tire marks. Steve announced that he was going to investigate, so he got out of the car to take a closer look at what kind of animal it was. But things only got stranger from there. As he stepped closer, he was struck by a sudden pang of sadness at the thought of such a helpless creature getting hit by a car. She was lying in the middle of the road, her legs tucked in under her. She was completely alone. Autumn leaves, the color of red, yellow, amber, and orange, drifted around her. She looked like something out of a Disney movie. It was a baby deer, but something wasn't right. On closer inspection, the fawn's legs looked collapsed in a strange position underneath her body, like a twisted knot. Did she not have the strength to get up? It was as if she was terrified or paralyzed. But there were no visible signs of injury, and she appeared to be trying to make herself look smaller. Steve didn't know what to do, so he signaled his friends over. Little did he know, he was inviting them into danger. They circled the fawn, making sure to give her space so as not to frighten her too much. They weren't sure if they should touch her or not. And then one of the men noticed something. Her eyes were open. The fawn was tiny. She must have been born just minutes before they arrived, which, judging by her size, was a real possibility. But if she was just born, then where was her mother? The men looked around the area, searching for her mother, but they couldn't see anything. If she's alone, how would she survive? They worried. But she wasn't alone. They were about to become aware of that very soon. Steve had already decided that he couldn't just leave her there and go on their merry way. He wanted to make sure she was okay. But maybe he should have left when he had the chance. One of the men told Steve to leave the fawn alone, but Steve was adamant. At least he should try to protect the fawn on the road so that she'd be safe from other cars, right? Steve had an idea. She was healthy, so she should get up soon, he said. I'll just go up there and park my truck sideways and wait until it gets up. But something else was waiting in the shadows, something that would give Steve the fright of his life. They wondered how long they'd have to guard the fawn against the dangers of the road when suddenly they heard a rustling sound behind them. The sound came from nowhere. They were all startled by the unexpected presence of it. It almost seemed like the area was deserted until now. They turned, hoping it was the mother. But it wasn't. They couldn't see anything. Confused, Steve looked around for the outline of a deer, but what he'd find wasn't a deer at all. A few minutes went by before the men heard the strange rustling again. This time, it sounded heavier, closer. Maybe it was the mother, and she was just keeping herself hidden. Steve and his friends decided to stay very quiet and make themselves look small so the mother would have more confidence to come out to her baby. If she was watching them, surely this would help. But she wasn't watching them, and making themselves look small in this situation was definitely not going to help. It wasn't a deer watching them, it was something else. The crucial moment happened when Steve noticed the fawn's eyes were still wide open, fixated on something in the woodland off the road, just next to his friends. Once the fawn had stopped perceiving the men as a threat, she went back to focus on the real issue at hand. Steve knew something was happening behind the scenes here that he didn't quite understand, so he followed her gaze. Hunched over on the ground, behind the bushes, was a young mountain lion. It was stalking the fawn, waiting for the men to leave to make its move. Steve's heart raced as he realized how dangerous a situation this was for his friends standing uncomfortably close to the predator. He shouted, "There's a mountain lion! Stand up, guys! Make yourselves big and scary right now!" The men jumped up simultaneously. The mountain lion knew its cover had been jeopardized. The sudden shouting and jumping of the men were enough to scare the mountain lion away. It abandoned its prey, and shortly after, a new rustling sound appeared. Steve and his friends were still in shock about how crazy that was, and now their hearts raced once more at the thought of the mountain lion coming back for round two. They braced themselves, but what came out from behind a tree now was none other than the fawn's mother. It was peering at them from behind the foliage as if thanking them for scaring away the danger. Relief fell across Steve's face. Now he and his friends were out of danger, and the fawn had a chance for survival. Eager to get out of there and give the fawn back to her mother and off the road, Steve slowly placed his hands under her hind legs and gently scooped her up. She didn't seem too spooked. Quickly standing up, he walked across the road to the woods. At the sight of her mother, the fawn suddenly started to move. Her little legs wiggled as Steve set her down gently and watched her leap away into the woods toward her anxious mother. "Yeah!" the guys exclaimed. They looked on in awe as they saw the fawn making its way to its mother. He turned, looking at his friends with his arms up in the air, an ecstatic look on his face. "That was awesome," said one of the guys. The others also expressed their delight at the mission accomplished. Steve decided to post about the remarkable moment online. The reactions were varied. Some people were critical of Steve and Paul's actions, saying the fawn probably would have made its way back to its mother, who was nearby, if the guys had just backed away. Most people praised Paul for helping save the baby deer, though. Steve's video of the incident has been viewed over 5 million times, but are the negative reactions to the video warranted? As a person, it's normal to worry that a baby by itself might be in trouble, but most of the time it's best to leave them alone, according to the Virginia Beach Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Female deer do tend to leave their fawns on their own while it's light out, but they always come back. Handling abandoned fawns could also have dire consequences. If you absolutely must handle baby deer, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife recommends that you rub an old towel in the grass and wipe the fawn to remove human scent. Wildlife experts generally advise against touching baby deer because the lingering human scent could cause their mothers to reject them. Paul had no time to clean the fawn before it ran off, but that doesn't necessarily mean that what he did was wrong. If the fawn is found in a dangerous place, it may be picked up and immediately moved several feet away from the danger, the Virginia Beach Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals advises on their website. They definitely approved of what Paul did that day, and we couldn't agree more.